me pretty well?
Yeah.
Okay. Last time I was here, people were having just the most violent gay sex, and so it's very different to be here now. No, I'm not going to demonstrate. This is a piece of a story that I've been working on for some time, since November, but there's lots of holidays, so the procrastination is valid. All right. It all started with a second glance. There was nothing odd about high schoolers eyeballing each other, hormones being what they were, but it was odd to get a second glance from him. He wasn't the sort of person that had heterosexuality branded on his forehead like some homophobic bull, but he also wasn't the type of guy that you stuffed into a trash can for exploring glitter as an accessory. He was aloof. He was aloof in that damaged way that middle-aged women obsessed with vampires love to write about. He was cute, but August had learned early on to suppress any thought or idea that would make anyone think he was gay. He wouldn't have even looked at him twice, except Jake Morris looked at him first. Jake's place in the social hierarchy should have been enough of a warning. After the last bell, he could always be found palling around with some of the guys from the football team, but the second glance grew into longer stares and even hallway hellos. When they had their school shooter drill, Jake crouched right behind him, and Jake's hot breath tickled the nape of his neck. Every unbridled hormone was begging to explode. Aunt Rachel complained about how long he spent in the shower that night. It was impossible not to romanticize it. The cool, aloof, wounded boy whose friends would never really understand him. The love in his heart and penis for the cute, questionably straight gay boy with the hair yellow like the sun. He even wrote a poem about it. A very bad poem. Eventually, August couldn't take it any longer. He had to know, and he felt particularly emboldened after Jake allowed a stray hand to linger on the small of his back as he walked by. Surely this meant love. He penned a note, several paragraphs of words that danced around one idea, and he left spaces in between them so that Jake could respond in kind. He didn't think it was obvious, it was, but figured that when Jake read it, he would understand. August almost delivered that note at least 6 times throughout the day, always losing courage at the last second. That was until the last bell. He recognized that inexistent tushy and disheveled JanSport backpack from several paces away, and for once, Jake wasn't surrounded by a flock of young men prepared to obliterate August for even daring to look at them the wrong way. Jake closed his locker, he looked down at his phone, typing a long message August wished he was at the other end of, but that didn't matter now, because soon he probably would be. He ignored every organ in his body that begged him to turn the other way. His heart felt like it was mere moments from failing, not from any serious malfunction, but because it was too humiliated to be a part of his circulatory system anymore. Why couldn't it be a part of Stacey Graham's circulatory system, it probably wondered. The biggest risk that she took was trying to keep the side ponytail alive. Jake turned to look at August when he realized the distance between them was shrinking. The corners of his lips pulled back into the sweetest, most kissable smile. "Hey," he said again, in that cool Jake Morris kind of way. August had rehearsed what he was going to say the entire day. "Hey, Jake," he'd begin, with an aloofness that would put Gwyneth Paltrow to shame. "I just wanted to give you this note. It's from me. I just thought we could clear some things up, and maybe then go get like a root beer float later." It was cool without being too disinterested, right? So what he ended up saying was, "It's not for you." Slipping the sweaty, folded piece of paper into Jake's hand and then hurrying past him toward the school's exit, where he proceeded to throw up into a trash can. Some of the football players were out on the lawn, and they encouraged his embarrassment with those nasty teenage boy cackles that they're so good at producing. August regained control of his innards. He raced home. Aunt Rachel made him cheese-stuffed ravioli for dinner, his favorite, but she could tell something was wrong. August denied it. In his room later that evening, he began to regret that stupid note. He also regretted the way that he handed him that note. He regretted running away. He regretted being uncertain about how well his shirt matched his pants. He counted sheep, but instead of counting sheep, he counted every single mistake he'd ever made in his living memory. And he fell asleep, curled up inside of a yucky shame cocoon, made up of thick comforters, used tissues, and fun-sized candy bar wrappers. August, it's time to wake up. Aunt Rachel's voice rang through the room like a bell signaling his execution. She began searching his yucky shame cocoon for body parts that he could talk out of. August. He groaned and he pulled the covers back over his head. I don't want to go today. Why not? I'm sick. She dug past the sheets and she felt his forehead. You're not sick. I'm dead. Tell them that I'm dead. I can't just tell them that you're dead because then they're going to send someone over to make sure that you're dead. It's just not a viable excuse anymore. He groaned. Her voice took a more forgiving tone. What happened at school yesterday? I did something stupid, and I told somebody that I liked them, and I shouldn't have done it, and now everyone at school is going to know, and they're going to ruin my life. Whether or not he included pronouns in his sentence, he knew Aunt Rachel knew. You just couldn't spend so much of your life with someone and love them so deeply and not know. She paused to consider the weight of his run-on sentence. She found his hand, and she held it in her own. You did something very, very brave. You did something more difficult than most kids your age will probably ever do. She squeezed his fingers. And I'm really proud of you for doing it. She waited a few moments to consider her next question. Are you safe? Are you going to be in danger if you go? August frowned, but he shook his head. I don't think so. I mean, it's not 1976 anymore. People are different. He'd never actually said it aloud before, but this isn't the most open-minded town in the world either. Other kids said cruel things to one another, hateful even, but he couldn't think of an occasion where anyone had been brutalized. His generation was raised by the participation trophy generation. They'd been beaten over the head with the idea that everyone should be treated relatively kindly. Aunt Rachel considered this for several more moments. He wished he could have been a fly on the inside of her brain. Your mom always told me to make sure that I kept you safe. She glanced at the photo of a blonde woman with mournful eyes sitting on August's nightstand. If you don't feel like you're going to be safe, then don't go. We'll figure something else out. August considered the alternatives, but he just didn't see evaporating into thin air as a solution. Who could live like that? No, he said, I'll go. I think it'll be okay. Nobody tells us how hard it can be just to survive in our own skin sometimes, but just know that no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. His phone then buzzed from within his sheets, and his heart sank, but the insatiable urge to know what text provoked the vibration was way worse than anything it could have said. See you at school today? Smiley face. Hope we can talk. It was Jake. August braced himself for a barrage of mean comments and stares the moment he stepped into the school building, but they never came. He went to first period, and Mr. Lavisetti proceeded to talk about his divorce. He went to second period, and the snickering girls in the back of the room mocked their friend's eating disorder. He even made it to lunch without a single second glance from anyone who might mean him harm. And then he saw Jake, and an army of butterflies invaded his stomach. Jake sailed through the cafeteria looking slightly more upbeat than usual. August searched every inch of his face for any flicker of expression that would suggest something was wrong, but he found none. The thick ocean of anxiety that he was drowning in was beginning to turn into delightful chocolate milk. Maybe this hadn't been a mistake after all. August tried to make casual conversation with his lunchmates, but his eyes kept darting in the direction of the pool table where Jake chuckled with his friends. And it was towards the end of the lunch period, when August was thoroughly coated in sweat, that Jake looked back at him. He smiled and then gestured to his cell phone. Meet in the bathroom in 5. His mind began to race, leafing through page after page of possibilities of things that could happen between two guys in a bathroom. Most of them were not suitable for film or television. He considered the quality of his breath and the underwear that he'd opted to wear. Neither had inspired a tremendous amount of confidence, but he went. The bell rang for 5th period. August would never wonder what he missed in those first 10 minutes of biology. Jake had him up against the wall, kissing him passionately the way people do in those romantic comedy movies August pretended to hate so much. The euphoria of having his dreams realized washed over him along with the scent of someone's worrying bowel movement. He felt... He felt just like Julia Roberts. At the climax of all of her redundant movies. This was love. Real love. Just promise you won't say anything, okay? Jake whispered into his ear. Yeah, of course, August agreed. Will you meet me again tonight? August considered his curfew, but when Jake kissed him again, he realized he'd be willing to break most contemporary laws to keep feeling this way. Yeah, of course. He seemed to have forgotten every other word. Good, Jake said, hands traveling to unsavory places. 10 o'clock at the creek. The creek. August knew the creek well. Well, he didn't know the creek well. He knew about the creek because other people who had significant others told him about the creek. They told him, that's where people go to hook up. And then they'd all smirk in that same way, like they were in on the same naughty secret. Like maybe that's where they went to have sex and watch TV shows their parents said they couldn't watch. Well, whatever the secret was, August was ready to find out. Jake left August in that rundown bathroom stall, wondering if the past 7.5 minutes had really just happened. He caught sight of his flushed cheeks and the ruddy spots on his face that Jake's stubble had left, and he decided it must have. He told the classmates who asked that they were just hives. Mrs. Boyd threatened to send him to the office if he showed up late again. He spent at least an hour and a half trying to decide what kind of clothes people wore to the creek. Tighter clothes that are easier to take off, tearaway pants. He then spent 43 minutes trying to get directions to the creek from his friends, none of whom had ever actually been invited. But he stumbled through the rest of the day, unable to focus on any task, wholeheartedly as the reel of possibilities played through his mind. They'd find each other in the darkness of the wilderness. They'd embrace, and they'd kiss, and they'd whisper declarations of love into each other's ears. Jake would gently grab his hand and pull him further into this remote sanctuary of darkness. Where are we going? August would say. You'll see, Jake would reply with a loving smile. They'd come across a clearing drenched in moonlight and fireflies. They'd fall into the grass and exchange passions. He wouldn't be able to hear anything over his beating heart. He'd close his eyes, and he'd wonder how anything so wonderful could happen to him. He couldn't wait. Even the sun seemed in a hurry to bring nightfall as it slipped beneath the horizon. He told Aunt Rachel that he accidentally took the drowsy allergy medication instead of the non-drowsy, and that he planned to just ride it out. You never say ride it out, she noticed. It's a new thing kids are saying, Rachel. He didn't give her any more time to ask questions, rushed back to his room, locked the door, yanked his sheets back, stuffed pillows underneath them, molding them into the shape of a chunky teenager, probably half a foot shorter than he was, but he was too excited to nitpick. He changed into his The Creek attire, a t-shirt with a naughty euphemism on it, and his lucky blue jeans. And then he slowly lifted the back window, and the only thing separating him from his freedom now was a bug screen. Simple enough, he reasoned. He started to tamper with the pegs on the corner of the screen. This was intended to keep pests out. Surely he could outsmart it. About 10 minutes later, he realized he could not outsmart it. He needed some sort of tool, and he was not confident in his ability to handle many tools, nor his ability to come up with an excuse for why the allergy medication hadn't yet knocked him unconscious, so he did the next best thing he could think of. He kicked the screen out. Nothing ever felt so liberating. In just 24 hours, he'd gone from your run-of-the-mill teenager to a complete bad boy with a secret boyfriend that he was going to the creek with to hook up and watch R-rated movies or whatever. He couldn't wait to do the creek. He couldn't wait to do the creek smirk next time someone brought it up, and he couldn't wait to see Jake again. The danger only added to the romance of the night. They were star-crossed lovers, meeting in the dark at the creek, the only place they could exchange their passions without fear of persecution. He rode his bike to 11th Street. The fence by the road had a snap in one of the rungs from where a girl drunk drove into it. Just like he'd been told, there was a makeshift path leading away from it into the woods. Brown grass underfoot relinquished its effort to live after enough people stepped on it. The path carried him towards a thicket of dark trees, huddled together as if for warmth. He'd driven past this place a number of times, never imagining that anything interesting happened within. It was just far enough away from the center of town that most folks wouldn't pay it any mind. Just far enough away from the center of town where teenagers with authority issues could do whatever their limited imaginations came up with. A dark figure drank in the moonlight up ahead. August stopped. He watched. August? Jake's unmistakable rasp cut through the air. August breathed a sigh of relief and hurried forward into Jake's open arms. I'm glad you can make it. In the moonlight, Jake looked different. There was no affectionate red glow in his cheeks, no intimate stare. In their place was a nervous expression, an urgent expression. He grabbed August's hands a little too tightly, and, he pulled him further into the woods. August laughed and glanced over his shoulder. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," he said, but there was no loving smile. They emerged into a clearing of dead grass, beer bottles, discarded chains, and a burning rubber tire. He was greeted only paces in by the smell of urine. The creek was just a feeble stream that ran nearby. Jake fell into a rusty lawn chair by the fire, gesturing to another just across from him. August sat down. He wrapped his arms around himself, glancing between the boy who set his heart on fire and the very real fire. "So, how was..." August felt the taut rubber of Joey Donovan's sneaker smash into the side of his face as he fell into the dirt. He barely had time to register what was happening before its twin kicked him in the ribs. Another foot drove up into his stomach, knocking the air clean out of him and spinning him onto his back. He only recognized 2 of the boys, but he was surrounded by at least 5, Jake among them. Their faces were scarlet, not from the fire, but from the hate in their hearts. They let August know exactly what they thought about him. They let him know how pathetic he was. They spit on him, they kicked him, they threw dirt and garbage on him. Jake hurt him too. Jake hurt him just as badly. The boy that he met in the bathroom during biology class was replaced by someone with a lot of anger in his eyes. August imagined Jake probably hadn't told his friends the entire story. And then something happened. The world around him lost its vibrance. The horrible red that bathed the clearing was swallowed into a vacuum of gray. The cacophony of hateful slurs, chirping crickets, and crackling fire faded into nothing, and then everything started to go black. Was this death? What came next alarmed him. A pale face staring directly at him through this new darkness. It scowled. It approached through the night, fingers with long, dirty nails reaching out at him, grabbing his face. They were surrounded by carnage, burning buildings, screaming women, smoke and ash thicker than oil. It was a woman he'd only seen in his worst nightmares, bloodshot, pale blue eyes staring into his own. And then she screamed, this horrible, guttural scream, and everything blurred again. Suddenly he found himself between these 2 worlds, the carnage of the nightmare, the carnage of reality, and all he could hear were more cries for help. He wanted to make sense of everything, but he was churning in a whirlpool of betrayal and rage, and any sensible thought was buried beneath pounds of desire to make someone feel pain. Dead. He wanted them all dead. He could feel wind and movement and heat and hear the sharp rattle of a chain, the cries from the nightmare, married cries from lower voices, male voices, Jake's voice. What the fuck? He sensed the other boys running away, scrambling over busted furniture, broken glass as they fed into the night. He opened his eyes. The nightmare and the woman vanished. His hand was extended in front of him, fingers bent except a single pointer. Jake Morris stared down at him. He swung high from above by his neck with a rusty chain. August lowered his hand, sobbing and gasping for air. He propped himself up on his elbows, head pounding as he looked left and right. He was alone. Is that a fire over there? An unfamiliar voice reached the clearing from several yards away. Pain and terror were interrupted by a new contender for his attention, panic. August groaned and gasped. He struggled to his feet. There was no time. He hurried out of the clearing, into the brush, back in the general direction, the path that had led him there. Jesus Christ, he heard someone shout. August thanked every god that he didn't believe in when he emerged on the other side of that forest and he saw his bike awaiting him. There was this gentle, unchanged stillness in the air on 11th Street, as though he traveled back in time to the moments just before he saw Jake. If only that had been the case.